David was the kind of man you wouldn't notice in a crowd, but whose absence would be deeply felt. A taxi driver in the heart of the city, he spent his days weaving through Lagos traffic and his nights chasing fares that barely covered the bills. Life hadn't been kind, but it hadn't broken him either. His small, one-bedroom apartment in a crumbling building on the mainland was home to him and Joy, his pregnant wife, whose soft laughter often dulled the harshness of the world outside. Their lives were simple, hard, but honest. David was quiet by nature, always thinking, always observing. He didn't speak much, but when he did, his words carried weight. Every naira he earned was stretched thin between hospital bills, baby preparations, and daily needs. But still, he drove, with tired eyes and calloused hands, believing somehow that if he just kept moving, things would eventually fall into place. The night hadn't gone well for David. Business had been painfully slow, and as the city thinned into shadows around 11 p.m., he found himself driving along the near-empty highway, eyes flicking between the road and the dashboard clock. He was restless, rent was due, and the payment sheet for the car loomed like a threat. The taxi wasn't even his. It was on hire purchase, and every missed balance pulled him deeper into a hole. Headlights flickered past in intervals, the road stretching endlessly ahead. Then Joy called. Her voice came soft but strained through the speaker, asking if he wouldn't come home soon. "It is late, David," she said, and he could hear the unease in her tone. He smiled faintly, despite his fatigue. "Just one more ride, Joy," he promised. "Just one and I am done." The line went silent, and he was alone again with the hum of the engine and the weight of the hour closing in. By 11:15 p.m., David was still on the highway, hands steady on the wheel, eyes restless with hope. Then he saw her, an old woman standing by the roadside, wrapped in a faded shawl, returning from a night vigil. He slowed down, confirmed her destination, and gave her a ride. At exactly 11:30 p.m., he dropped her off and sighed deeply, deciding that was it for the night. Joy would call again soon, and he did not want another worried voice echoing in his head. Turning back toward the highway, he spotted something, or someone, far ahead. A figure stood motionless by the side of the road, not pacing, not looking around, just fixed in place like a forgotten statue. As he approached, David told himself he would not stop unless the man was going his way. At exactly 11:40 p.m., he pulled up beside the figure. It was a man in a clean, professional suit, the kind worn by office workers returning from a late shift. The man raised one hand in a quiet wave. David rolled down his window and asked, "Where are you headed, sir?" The answer was calm and direct. "St. Patrick Street. Near the cemetery." David blinked. The cemetery? At this time of the night? He hesitated. "I am sorry, sir, but I am not going that way." Just then, Joy's name lit up on his phone screen again. Annoyed, distracted, he repeated, "I am sorry, sir, but I am not going that way." He was about to drive off when the man said quietly, "20,000 for this ride would actually go a long way." David froze, eyes staring into the stretch of dark road ahead. Joy, 20,000, the bills, the weekend pressure. All of it crashed into him at once. He turned to look at the man again. "Enter," he said. The man walked to the door, and even his steps were strange, too measured, too silent. David felt a cold flicker of doubt, but the money was louder than his instincts. The man did not sit beside him or in the middle. He sat directly behind David's seat. The ride began at exactly 11:45 p.m., and David kept stealing glances through the rearview mirror, each one tightening the knot in his chest. David arrived at the cemetery gate in silence, the car's headlights cutting through the stillness like blades. Just as he was about to switch off the engine, the man in the back seat stretched a bundle of cash toward him. The motion was slow, deliberate, and it was the first movement David had noticed since the ride began. Not a single sound had come from the man since he entered the car. No cough, no breath, not even the soft rustle of clothes shifting. David reached back to take the money and immediately saw that it was more than they agreed. Twice as much, surprised. He turned around to tell the man he had overpaid, but the back door was wide open, and the seat was empty. The man was gone. Panic surged through him as he jumped out of the car, rushing to the back to check again. No one. just the money clutched tightly in his hand. He stood there, frozen, trying to process what had just happened. The cemetery gate ahead of him remained shut, silent as the grave beyond it. Then his phone rang, joy again. He glanced at the screen, then at his wristwatch. It was exactly 12 a.m. Without answering, he slid back into the driver's seat and drove off, his pulse louder than the engine. Morning crept in with its usual rhythm. It was Sunday, and the compound buzzed with sounds of neighbors preparing for church, clothes being ironed, children bathed, pots clanging. Inside their small apartment, David was trying to explain the previous night to Joy. Not the real part, just the usual tired excuses, stitched with apology. Joy, with her heavy belly and the quiet sharpness only an African wife could master, said nothing. She simply walked into the kitchen, her silence louder than any scolding. Feeling the weight of her disappointment, David stepped outside to clear his head. He greeted a few neighbors and made his way to the car, as was his routine. He opened the doors one after the other, inspecting every part. But when he reached the back seat, the exact spot where the last passenger had sat, he paused. There it was. A neatly folded coat resting on the seat. It looked clean and well kept. And instantly he recognized it, not as his, but from his old school days. It was the official coat worn by final year students. Confused, he picked it up, and as he unfolded it, something slipped out. A booklet. David's hands trembled as he picked it up and looked at the cover. It was a memorial program for a man named Peter. The face on the front was unmistakable. It was the same man from last night's ride. The one who had vanished at the cemetery. According to the program, Peter had died 10 years ago. David stood frozen, the booklet in his hands feeling heavier by the second. His breath caught in his throat. A cold chill wrapped around his spine as the silence of the car pressed in. The world around him seemed to slow. Church bells ringing in the distance now sounded distant and warped. The air smelled different, thicker, like rain that refused to fall. His hands began to sweat, the paper softening in his grip. He looked around him as though reality would change if someone else confirmed it. But no one was watching. He was alone, holding evidence of a ghostly encounter. Slowly, almost fearfully, he placed the jacket and the booklet back exactly where he found them, his movements shaky and unsure. Then, without a word, he closed the door and walked back inside, eyes wide, heart pounding, his world no longer the same. Joy saw it in his face that morning. The silence that stayed too long, the way he kept staring at nothing. She reached for his hand gently and said, "Don't worry about last night, David. Just be careful, for me and the unborn baby." He pulled his hand away softly and shook his head. "It's not that," he said. Then he paused and added, "I want to see Samuel, that was all." He stepped outside, walked to the car, and opened the back door. The coat was still there, exactly how he left it. As he picked it up, something slipped out from the booklet and landed by his foot. A single piece of paper. He bent down and picked it up slowly. It was a note. The writing was shaky, uneven, like the pen had struggled. "Do you remember me? David." His fingers tightened around the paper. Something cold crawled across the back of his neck. The street outside was quiet, but the silence now felt heavier, like it was watching him. His breath grew shallow. The air felt strange. His thoughts were loud, scattered, trying to make sense of the moment but failing. He glanced toward the house, then down at the note again, and for a second, it didn't feel like the ground beneath him was steady. Without saying a word, he folded the paper, stuffed it into his pocket, and walked fast toward the next compound. Samuel's house was close, but right now, it felt far. Samuel was at home, seated just outside his door with a bowl of water and a towel, cleaning his shoes for church. He looked up as David approached, coat in hand. "David? This early?" he said, standing. They exchanged a quiet greeting before Samuel asked, "What brought you to my house this Sunday morning?" David said nothing at first. He held the coat a little tighter, then slowly began to speak. He told Samuel everything. How he had picked up a late-night passenger dressed in a suit, how the man said he was going to the cemetery, how he disappeared before David could say anything, and how this morning he found the coat in the back seat. Finally, he brought out the memorial program and handed it to Samuel. The moment Samuel saw the face on the cover, his expression changed. "This is Peter," he said. "He died 10 years ago." David blinked. "You know him?" Samuel looked up. "David, have you forgotten so soon? Peter was in our set. Final year." David stared at him, his mind pulling up blanks. His voice dropped. "What does he want from me?" he asked, almost to himself. Samuel shook his head slowly. "I do not know. I do not even remember everything clearly. But I know Peter did not die well. He was killed by some students. That day, school was closed early. They sent everyone home. And by the time the weekend ended, nobody talked about it again. The news just disappeared. And since that day, I never heard his name again." David sat down, the coat still in his hand. Something deep inside him had shifted. Whatever was happening, it was not over. Sunday evening arrived quietly. The light was softer now, and the heat of the day had given way to something still and heavy. David needed space. After hours with Joy, watching her pace slowly around the house, lying down and sitting up again with quiet groans, he felt the walls pressing in. He grabbed the car keys and left. The coat, he had thrown it into the trunk without looking twice. He drove aimlessly toward the town, the silence inside the car louder than anything outside. As he reached a bend near the market road, he saw a boy by the roadside, small, barely 10, standing alone. David slowed the car, rolled down the window. "Who are you with?" he asked. "Where are you going?" The boy said nothing. He raised one hand and pointed down the road, into the distance. Something about him was odd, but David's heart still leaned toward kindness. He unlocked the door. The boy climbed in without a word and sat directly behind David's seat. The same spot. The exact same spot. David felt it in his chest but said nothing. It was just a child. He drove slowly. The road stretched ahead, empty. Then he heard it. His name. Not loud but clear. A voice calling, "David." He slammed the brakes. His chest tightened. He turned sharply, staring at the boy. "Did you hear that?" he asked. The boy did not blink. He said nothing. Just stared at him, like he was watching something far behind David's eyes. David kept driving, slower now. His hands were tense on the wheel. He looked at the boy through the mirror again. The boy's gaze did not drop. His eyes stayed fixed on David, unblinking. Then, David heard it again. But this time, not with his ears. Inside his head. A voice, calm and cold. "David. Prince Hill Secondary School. Year 2005. David hit the brakes harder this time, the car jerking to a stop. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" he shouted, twisting around in his seat. The boy did not move. He just stared. He had not opened his mouth. He had not spoken a word. But the voice had been his. Slowly, the boy reached for the door, opened it, and stepped out. He walked into the distance without turning back. The street swallowed him. By the time David got home, the compound was quiet. He unlocked the door and stepped into the living room, and froze. Joy was on the couch, doubled over, her arms gripping her belly. Her face was soaked in sweat, and her lips were pressed tightly together like she was holding in a scream. But the pain was loud in her eyes. Her body jerked slightly with each wave that hit her. She looked up at him, finally letting out a sharp breath between clenched teeth. David rushed to her side, panic rising fast. "Joy, why did you not call me?" he asked, kneeling beside her. She could not answer, only a weak shake of her head, followed by another sharp inhale as the pain tightened around her again. David stood, grabbed his keys with shaking hands, and came back to lift her. Her body was limp but trembling, and he could feel the strain in every part of her. She winced as he carried her out the door. The air outside was heavy, but he did not stop. He opened the car, eased her into the back seat, and shut the door with a force that rattled the window. Then he jumped into the front, started the engine, and drove fast through the night. No radio, no traffic, just the sound of her breathing in short, broken gasps. The midwife's house was near, just past the next compound. But at that moment, it felt miles away. When they arrived, David jumped out before the car had fully stopped. He ran to the back seat, opened the door, and helped Joy out slowly. Her breathing was sharp, and her grip on his arm was tight. Every few steps, she flinched. The pain had not slowed down. He supported her all the way to the midwife's front door and knocked hard. A dim light came on. Moments later, the woman stepped out, wrapped in a scarf, her face calm but alert. She took one look at Joy and nodded. "Bring her in." They all went inside. But after guiding Joy into the room, the midwife turned to David and said, "Please wait here." The door closed gently. And then, it was just silence. David stood there, pacing, sitting, standing again. His hands would not stay still. Every sound from the room made his heart jump. Minutes passed like hours. Then finally, the midwife came out. Her face was unreadable. She walked over slowly and asked, "Is this her first pregnancy?" David nodded quickly, his face full of worry. Yes, it is." The woman sighed, looked toward the door, then back at him. "I am not sure yet, but it seems she is having some difficulty pushing. I have given her something to calm her, ease the pain a little. She is asleep now." David blinked. Asleep? He could not make sense of that. Should she be asleep? Was that normal? But the woman's voice had not changed. She seemed calm. She told him to come back in the morning, Monday. "We will try again when she wakes up," she said. "If anything urgent comes up, I will call you immediately." David looked at her with wide, tired eyes. "Joy is all I have in this life," he said. "She is my life. I cannot let anything happen to her. I will wait here all night if I have to." The woman shook her head gently. "There is no need for that. As you can see, she is resting. She is safe with me. Go and rest. You will need your strength tomorrow." David stood there, torn, the night pressing in on all sides. It was 2 a.m. The night was silent, too silent, and the clock on the wall ticked softly in the midwife's small, dimly lit room. Joy lay still on the bed, one hand resting on the curve of her swollen belly. The lamp on the table flickered, casting long shadows against the peeling wall. Everything in the room had gone still, like time itself was holding its breath. That was when it happened. She drifted, not into sleep, but into something else. A dream, but not the kind that feels far away. This one felt real. Too real. She was still in the same room, on the same bed, in the same position. Nothing had changed. Except, when her eyes opened slowly in the dream, someone was there. Peter was standing by the door, still, silent. His suit was neat, but his face looked pale and hollow, like life had drained from it long ago. His eyes were dark, sunken, and fixed directly on her. The air around him felt colder, heavier. He was not breathing. He did not blink. Joy tried to move, but her limbs would not respond. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Her voice caught in her throat like it was being held back by something unseen. All she could do was watch as Peter raised one hand, slowly, like he was underwater, and pointed it toward her belly. That was when her scream finally broke free. The sound tore through the room and snapped her back into the real world. She sat up with a jolt, drenched in sweat, gasping for air. The midwife rushed in with a lantern, her face sharp with alertness. "Joy!" she called, kneeling beside her. Joy's eyes were wide, terrified, her chest heaving. "I saw him," she said breathlessly. "He was here, standing right there. I saw him." The midwife placed a hand on her shoulder and began whispering softly, calming her with practiced ease. Then she stood up quickly, walked to the corner of the room, and reached for her phone. "Let me call David," she said. Morning came slowly. The sun was barely up when David arrived at the midwife's house, his shirt wrinkled, eyes red from a night without sleep. The door creaked open and he stepped inside quietly. Joy was lying on the bed, her swollen tummy rising and falling gently as she slept. For a moment, David just stood there watching her. She looked peaceful now, but something in the air still felt off, like the night had not fully ended. The midwife came to his side and whispered. She screamed in the middle of the night. Said she saw someone standing in the room. She was shaking when I came in. David frowned, his eyes flicking back to Joy. "Who did she say she saw?" he asked. The woman shook her head. She did not call a name, just kept saying, "He was standing there." David sighed. It was probably just a bad dream. But before the words could settle, Joy jolted upright with a loud scream, grabbing her waist with both hands. Her face twisted in pain. "It is starting again," the midwife said quickly, rushing to her side. David moved fast too, grabbing Joy's hand as she leaned back, gasping. "Hold her," the midwife said. This time, she did not send him out. She pulled the sheets aside, spread Joy's legs, and braced herself. "Push," she said firmly. Joy screamed as she tried. Her voice filled the room, her hands squeezing David's with all the strength she had. But nothing. "Push," the midwife repeated. More screams. More shaking. But still, nothing. Joy collapsed back onto the bed, eyes fluttering, her chest rising and falling fast. She looked drained, almost lifeless, her breath shallow and quick. The midwife stood up slowly, her face tense. "Something is not right," she said. "This is not normal. You need to call your pastor, or we may be forced to take her for a cesarean." David's eyes widened. The midwife continued, "That is dangerous. She has never given birth before. Her body may not survive it." David looked down at Joy, her hands still in his, and for the first time since the night Peter vanished, he truly felt fear pressing into his bones. This is only the beginning. The night may have passed, but the shadows are not done. What follows next will change everything.